The glass shattered before anyone spoke. It hit the marble floor with a sharp crack, red wine spreading like fresh blood beneath polished shoes. Every head in the restaurant turned toward our table. Lena's trembling hand still hovered in the air. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the man standing 3 tables away. Daniel, her first love, the one she once swore she'd buried in the past. He looked thinner than the confident university senior I remembered, his expensive coat wrinkled, his face pale with exhaustion. Yet the moment their eyes met, the entire world seemed to disappear around them. I slowly placed my fork down. "Lena." She flinched. Our anniversary dinner." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Daniel suddenly walked toward us, stopping beside our table with an awkward smile. "Lena, 5 years together. 3 years of marriage. 1 4-year-old son sleeping peacefully at my parents' house, while I tried to celebrate the only evening we had managed to reserve in months. And now, he was here." "I didn't know you'd be here," Daniel said softly. Neither did she. That much was obvious. But something inside her expression frightened me more than surprise. Hope. It flickered through her eyes before she buried it beneath guilt. I heard you were overseas. I came back yesterday." Silence swallowed the table. The waiter approached nervously. "Sir, should I clean?" "Later." He immediately stepped away. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "I won't interrupt. I just wanted to say hello." He turned to leave. "Lena." She called his name before she even realized it. Her chair scraped across the floor. She looked at me, then back at him. "Are you okay?" A simple question. 1 sentence. But somehow it made me feel like the only person at the table who didn't belong. Daniel laughed bitterly. "I'll survive." He left. Only after the restaurant doors closed did Lena finally sit again. "I'm sorry." I watched the untouched steak growing cold between us. "For what?" She swallowed. "He looked terrible." "So?" "He used to." She stopped. "Used to." The words neither of us wanted to hear. I smiled. Not because anything was funny. Because I suddenly understood something I had refused to admit for years. People never truly forget the person who taught them what first love feels like. Some simply become better at pretending. That night, neither of us slept. At 2 in the morning, I found Lena standing on the balcony. The city lights reflected in her wet eyes. "You've been crying." She quickly wiped her face. "It's cold. It's June." She forced a laugh. "I know." I walked beside her. "You want to help him?" She froze. "I didn't say that." "You don't have to." Silence answered me. Then, "They said his company collapsed." I remained quiet. "He owes people money." Silence. "His mother is sick." More silence. "I heard she can't afford surgery." She finally looked at me. "I'm not asking for permission." "I know. I'm just." She couldn't finish. I looked over the sleeping city. "I won't stop you." She blinked. "What?" "If helping him lets you sleep at night." I slipped my wedding ring around my finger. "Then help him." Her shoulders relaxed. "Thank you." That smile. It wasn't for me. I noticed it anyway. The following week became strangely peaceful. Lena worked late almost every evening. She always had explanations. Hospital, bank, old classmates, lawyers. I never asked for receipts. Trust wasn't something you proved with paper. Either it existed, or it didn't. One Friday afternoon, my phone rang while I was reviewing contracts. "Mr. Carter?" "Speaking." "This is Harmony Children's Academy." My heartbeat paused. Ethan fell from the climbing frame. I was already grabbing my keys. "Is he conscious?" "Yes, but he's asking for his mother." "I'm coming." Traffic had never felt so cruel. By the time I reached the school, Ethan sat in the nurse's office with a bandage around his forehead. The moment he saw me, he burst into tears. "Daddy." I knelt immediately. "I'm here." His tiny hands clung to my shirt. It hurt. "I know." I kissed his hair. "You were brave." The teacher sighed. "We tried calling Mrs. Carter 8 times. I looked at my phone. 12 missed calls to Lena. None returned. Maybe she was driving. The teacher hesitated. "I hope so." I carried Ethan home myself. That evening he fell asleep holding my hand. Only after midnight did the apartment door finally open. Lena stepped inside quietly. She froze when she saw me sitting in darkness. "You scared me." Ethan got hurt. Her face drained of color. "What?" "He asked for you." Where were you?" She lowered her eyes. "Hospital. With Daniel." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. You could have answered one call. My voice remained calm, almost too calm. Lena slowly placed her handbag on the table. My phone died. I nodded. I see. It's true. I'm sure it is. She stepped closer. You're angry. No. You're lying. I looked toward Ethan's bedroom. He cried for you. The sentence hit harder than shouting ever could. She covered her mouth. I didn't know. No. You think I chose Daniel over Ethan? I didn't answer. Because tonight. She had. Maybe not intentionally. But intentions didn't erase consequences. She sat across from me, exhaustion covering her face. Daniel's mother collapsed during the meeting. So you stayed. There was no one else. What about the doctors? It wasn't like that. What was it like? Her eyes reddened. They needed someone to sign paperwork. And somehow that became your responsibility. I couldn't leave. I smiled faintly. There it is. What? The truth. She frowned. I wasn't asking whether you physically could leave. I was asking whether you wanted to. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That silence answered everything. Days turned into weeks. Daniel slowly rebuilt his business with financial help from former classmates, including Lena. She never hid it. I lent him money. I know. I'll get it back. I believe you. I only want to help him stand again. I know. Each conversation ended exactly the same. No arguments. No accusations. Only distance. Invisible. Growing. One evening Ethan ran into the living room holding a drawing. Daddy, what is it? I drew our family. He proudly handed me the paper. 3 stick figures. Me. Him. His grandmother. I blinked. Where's Mommy? He looked confused. She's busy. Lena had just entered through the front door. The drawing slipped from my fingers. She picked it up. Her smile disappeared. Ethan. The little boy innocently scratched his head. I forgot. Forgot. Children rarely lied. They simply reflected what they experienced. Lena locked herself in the bathroom for nearly an hour. I heard her crying through the door, but I didn't knock. Sometimes guilt needed privacy. Another month passed. Then another. The arguments never exploded. Instead, they dissolved into politeness. Breakfast's ready. Thank you. I'm working late. Okay. Good night. Good night. Marriage didn't always die through betrayal. Sometimes, it starved. One unnoticed meal at a time. Winter arrived. I was attending an investment conference downtown when someone called my name. Lucas. I turned. Daniel. He looked healthier now. Tailored suit. Confident posture. Successful again. He smiled genuinely. I've been wanting to thank you. For what? For letting Lena help me. Interesting choice of words. Letting. As if I owned her decisions. He looked embarrassed. I didn't mean. I know. He hesitated. I'll repay everything soon. I'm sure you will. Before leaving, he stopped once more. She talks about you often. I almost laughed. What does she say? That you're a good man. Good. Not loved. Not missed. Not irreplaceable. Just good. Like describing a reliable accountant. Or a dependable neighbor. I wished him well and walked away. For the first time since that anniversary dinner, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not jealousy. Only clarity. That night I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m, I opened the old wooden box beneath our bed. Inside rested dozens of photographs. University graduation. Our wedding. Ethan's birth. Beach vacations. Birthdays. Ordinary happiness. I realized something strange. Every memory contained me. But somewhere along the way, her heart had begun facing another direction. Maybe only a little. Maybe only during moments when life reminded her of Daniel. But little by little, that was enough. The next morning, I made breakfast. Packed Ethan's school bag. Buttoned his tiny coat. As he held my hand outside the apartment, he suddenly looked up. Daddy. Yes. If Mommy goes away again. His voice was so quiet I almost missed it. Will you stay? My throat tightened. I crouched until our eyes met. I'll always stay. He nodded as though that answer carried the weight of the world. When I stood again, I saw Lena watching us from the balcony. She had heard every word. She didn't call my name. She simply stood there, gripping the railing until her knuckles turned white. For the first time, I wasn't wondering whether she would choose us. I was wondering whether I should keep waiting for her to. The divorce papers remained inside my desk drawer for 11 days. Every morning, I unlocked the drawer, stared at the envelope, then closed it again. Not because I was hesitating, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't acting out of anger. Anger fades. Regret doesn't. On the 12th morning, I walked Ethan to school before heading to the office. When I returned home that evening, Lena was already there. That alone felt unusual. She was cooking. The scent of ginger and soy sauce filled the apartment. She looked over her shoulder with a tentative smile. "You're home." "I am. I made your favorite." I loosened my tie. I noticed. An uncomfortable silence settled between us. She stirred the soup longer than necessary. "I've been thinking." "So have I." She turned off the stove. "I know things haven't been good." "No. They can get better." I studied her face. For the first time in months, she looked genuinely afraid. Not because of Daniel. Because of us. "I've decided to stop helping him." The words hung in the air. I didn't react. She stepped closer. "I mean it." "Why?" She blinked. "What do you mean? Why now?" She struggled to answer. "I realized I've neglected this family." I nodded slowly. And I don't want to lose you." There it was. The sentence I'd once longed to hear. But it arrived too late. "You've already lost something." Her breathing hitched. "What?" "My trust." She lowered her head. "I know." "No." I shook my head gently. "I don't think you do." Dinner was quiet. Ethan chatted excitedly about a science project involving paper rockets. Lena laughed at all the right moments. She served us food. She peeled shrimp for Ethan. She looked exactly like the woman I'd married. Yet something invisible had changed. She wasn't trying to share happiness. She was trying to repair damage. There's a difference. After Ethan went to bed, she followed me onto the balcony. "Lucas. Are we okay?" The city hummed below us. Thousands of lights. Millions of strangers. Some probably falling in love. Others learning how love ended. "What do you think?" She wrapped her arms around herself. "I think you're slipping away." I already did. Her eyes filled instantly. "When?" "The day Ethan needed you." I apologized. "I know." I cried. "I know." I regretted it. "I know." She looked at me desperately. "Then why does it still feel impossible?" "Because apologies don't erase memories." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I never loved Daniel more than you." I finally turned toward her. "I believe you." She looked surprised. "You do?" "Yes." Her shoulders relaxed. Until I continued. "But I think you loved the guilt you felt toward him more than the responsibility you had toward us." Her lips trembled. She couldn't deny it. Because deep down, she knew it was true. The next morning, my secretary knocked on my office door. "Mr. Carter, come in." She placed a visitor's card on my desk. "Someone insists on seeing you." I looked at the name. Daniel Harper. "Send him in." A moment later, he entered carrying a thick envelope. "I won't take much of your time." He looked uncomfortable. I brought the money. He placed a cashier's check on the desk. The full amount Lena lent me. I glanced at it. "That's between you and her." "I know. But," he sighed, "I think it's better if you give it to her." I leaned back. "Why?" His smile was bitter. "Because she won't accept it." That caught my attention. "What do you mean?" "I've tried 3 times." He laughed quietly. "She keeps saying I should use it to stabilize the company." I frowned. "How much did she lend you?" He hesitated, then answered, $800,000. The room fell silent. 800,000. Not impossible for us, but not a casual loan. Not without discussion. Not without partnership. She had never mentioned the amount, only that she'd helped. My expression must have changed because Daniel quickly added, "I'll repay every cent." "I'm sure you will." He stood. "There's one more thing." I looked up. "I think." He struggled to find the words. I became the excuse. "What?" "I don't think Lena kept helping because of me." I remained silent. She kept helping because every time she wanted to stop, she remembered who I used to be. He smiled sadly. "The version she wanted to save no longer exists." He bowed slightly before leaving. I sat alone for a long time. Not because of the money. Because of what he'd just admitted. Even the man she'd tried to rescue knew. She wasn't saving him anymore. She was chasing a memory. That evening, I placed the cashier's check on the dining table. Lena stared at it in confusion. "What's this?" Daniel came by. Her face stiffened. "He what?" "He repaid you." She picked up the check with trembling fingers. "He shouldn't have." "Why?" "He still needs." She stopped herself. I watched quietly. She closed her eyes. "You're right." The words sounded painfully heavy. "He doesn't need me anymore." "No." "He hasn't for a while." "No." She laughed once. A broken, humorless sound. "I've been so stupid." I didn't answer. Because this wasn't about intelligence. It was about priorities. Over the next few weeks, Lena changed. She left work on time. She attended Ethan's school activities. She turned off her phone during dinner. She smiled more. She slept beside me instead of falling asleep on the couch. Anyone watching from outside would think our marriage was healing. Only we knew the truth. Some cracks remain invisible. One Saturday morning, Ethan tugged at my sleeve. "Daddy, what is it?" "My school has family day next week." "Sounds fun. You and Mommy are both coming, right?" Before I could answer, Lena spoke first. "Of course." She smiled brightly. "I wouldn't miss it." Ethan cheered. For a brief moment, the apartment felt warm again. Family day arrived beneath a clear spring sky. Children laughed across the playground. Parents competed in silly relay races. Teachers handed out colorful ribbons. Ethan ran toward us carrying a tiny whistle. "We have to do the three-legged race." He looked impossibly excited. Lena laughed. "Then let's win." For the first time in months, we stood side by side. A teacher tied our inside ankles together. "Ready?" Ethan clapped wildly. "Go." We stumbled immediately. Lena burst into genuine laughter. I couldn't help smiling. Again, slower this time. One step, then another. By the halfway mark, we had found a rhythm. When we crossed the finish line, Ethan launched himself into our arms. We did it. His laughter echoed across the field. For one dangerous second, I almost believed things could return to the way they were. Then a familiar voice interrupted. "Lena." She froze. So did I. Daniel stood near the entrance, holding a bouquet of flowers. He looked embarrassed. I came to return something. Every smile disappeared. He walked over carefully. "I found this while cleaning my old apartment." He held out a small wooden music box. Lena's face turned pale. "I thought you'd want it back." She didn't take it. Instead, she looked at me, really looked at me, as if suddenly understanding what this moment meant. Daniel noticed too. His expression changed. "I'm sorry." He quietly placed the music box on a nearby bench. "I shouldn't have come." He turned to leave, but Ethan spoke before anyone else could. "Mister." Daniel stopped. "My mommy promised today belongs to me." The playground fell silent around us. Children kept playing. Parents kept laughing. Yet our little corner of the world had stopped breathing. Daniel looked at Ethan, then at Lena. Finally, he smiled sadly. "You're right." He nodded once. "It should." Without another word, he walked away. Lena stared after him, tears streaming silently down her face. Not because she wanted to follow him, because a 6-year-old child had reminded all 3 adults what should have been obvious from the beginning. She slowly turned toward me. "I finally understand." I picked up the abandoned music box. The wood was worn smooth with age, a relic of first love, a symbol of unfinished memories. I placed it back into her hands. "You decide what to do with it." She held it tightly against her chest. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, I found the music box resting inside the fireplace. Lena struck a match. The tiny flame caught the dry wood. She watched without speaking as the melody inside played one final, distorted tune before disappearing into smoke. Neither of us cried, but as the last ember faded, I realized something painful. Burning an old memory was easy. Living with the years it had already stolen was not. The ashes of the music box remained in the fireplace for weeks. Lena never cleaned them. Neither did I. Every time I walked past them, I was reminded that destroying a symbol was far easier than repairing what had been broken because of it. Life settled into something almost peaceful. Almost. Lena stopped mentioning Daniel completely. She left work on time. Every Saturday belonged to Ethan. She attended parent-teacher meetings, packed his lunch, and read bedtime stories with dramatic voices that made him laugh until he hiccuped. Watching them together should have made me happy. Instead, it left me strangely empty, because every thoughtful gesture carried the quiet weight of apology. One evening, Ethan fell asleep on the living room sofa after finishing his homework. Lena gently covered him with a blanket. "He looks just like you when he's sleeping." I smiled faintly. "He has your stubbornness." She laughed. "He definitely does." The laughter faded. "I've been waiting for you to yell at me." I looked up from my book. "What?" "Or blame me." "I already know what happened." "I know." She stared at the floor. "But you've never punished me." The words sounded foreign in our home. Punished. Marriage wasn't a courtroom. "I don't want to punish you." "Then why does it still feel like I'm losing you every day?" I closed the book. "Because you're measuring progress by your effort." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "You think every dinner you cook, every school event you attend, every promise you keep should slowly erase what happened." She stayed silent. but I'm measuring something else. What? My heart. She swallowed. And it hasn't caught up yet. A week later, I received an unexpected invitation. Harper Technologies. Annual Investor Appreciation Gala. Hosted by Daniel. My assistant looked puzzled. Should I decline? I studied the elegant black envelope. No. You'll attend? Yes. She nodded and left. I wasn't curious about Daniel. I was curious about why he'd invited me. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. Investors, executives, reporters. Everyone wore polished smiles and tailored suits. Lena adjusted my tie before we entered. You don't have to stay long. I know. You can leave any time. I glanced at her. Are you worried? She hesitated. A little. Inside, Daniel spotted us almost immediately. He walked over with 2 glasses of sparkling water. No alcohol tonight. He smiled. I remember you don't drink at business events. A small detail. One he'd remembered from years ago. He handed me a glass. Thank you for coming. I was curious. I figured. He chuckled. Then his expression turned serious. I owe you an explanation. You don't owe me anything. I do. He looked toward the stage where guests were finding their seats. I've sold the company. That surprised me. What? The acquisition finalized yesterday. You rebuilt it just to sell it? Exactly. Why? He smiled, though sadness lingered in his eyes. Because I was chasing the wrong dream. Before I could ask another question, the host announced the ceremony. Daniel stepped onto the stage. The room applauded. He looked across the crowd. Then his gaze settled on us. I'd like to thank someone. The ballroom quieted. 5 years ago, I believed success meant proving everyone wrong. A screen behind him displayed photographs of the company's journey. I lost everything. Another photograph appeared. An empty office. Bankruptcy documents. Hospital corridors. I thought someone had saved me. His eyes briefly found Lena. But I misunderstood. The audience listened intently. No one can save a man determined to live in the past. Silence filled the hall. I rebuilt my company because someone believed I still had value. He turned toward me. But today I want to thank the man who never came looking for revenge. Whispers spread through the crowd. You could have humiliated me. You could have destroyed my reputation. You could have forbidden your wife from helping me. He smiled. But you didn't. He bowed deeply. You protected your dignity instead. The applause started slowly, then grew louder. I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I simply nodded once. Some acknowledgments were better received quietly. After the gala ended, the reporters surrounded Daniel. Questions flew from every direction. Mr. Harper, why sell such a successful company? Are you retiring? He answered patiently before disappearing into the crowd. Lena and I slipped out through a side exit. The cold night air wrapped around us. Neither of us spoke until we reached the parking lot. I never asked him to thank you. I know. He decided that himself. I know. She unlocked the car, but didn't get inside. I used to think helping people meant never letting go. Her voice trembled. Now I think, maybe helping someone also means knowing when to walk away. I leaned against the car. What changed? She laughed softly. Watching you. I remained quiet. She looked toward the city lights. You never tried to control me. You never insulted him. You never fought for attention. She wiped away a tear. You just stepped back. I was tired. I know. Her shoulders slumped. And I mistook your silence for patience. She looked at me with heartbreaking honesty. It wasn't patience. No. It was disappointment. I nodded once. She closed her eyes. I don't know how to fix that. You can't. The words were gentle, not cruel. She accepted them without argument. 2 months later, another unexpected event changed everything. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number. Hello. Mr. Carter? Yes. My name is Olivia Chun. Her voice sounded professional. I'm Daniel Harper's attorney. I frowned. Is something wrong? He asked me to deliver a sealed package to you. What package? A personal letter. Why not send it by mail? There was a pause. Because Mr. Harper passed away this morning. The world went completely still. What? I'm very sorry. He was involved in a highway accident shortly after dawn. I couldn't process the words. He died. Yes. He instructed us that if anything happened to him, this letter should be delivered only to you. The funeral took place 3 days later. Rain fell steadily over rows of black umbrellas. Business partners, former classmates, employees. even strangers whose lives he'd quietly helped rebuild. Lena stood beside me in silence. She cried, not with desperate grief, but with quiet mourning for someone whose life had finally found direction, only to end too soon. After everyone left, Olivia handed me a thick envelope. He wanted you to read it alone. That night, after Ethan had gone to sleep, I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Lucas, if you're reading this, then fate has an odd sense of humor. First, let me apologize. Not because I loved Lena once. Young people fall in love every day, but because I allowed an old memory to interfere with the life she'd already built. I noticed the moment you did. You probably never realized how many times I tried to push her away. She simply refused. Not because she loved me, because she couldn't forgive herself for leaving me behind years ago. Please don't blame her forever. Her biggest mistake wasn't loving the wrong man. It was carrying guilt longer than wisdom. There's one last truth I never told anyone. The day Ethan was injured, I begged her to answer her phone. She ignored me. She said if she answered, she'd leave immediately. She wanted to stay until my mother's surgery ended. I told her to go. She refused. That decision was hers, not mine. If you cannot forgive her, at least don't hate yourself for failing to stop any of it. You were never the reason your family broke. You were the reason it survived as long as it did. Take care of your son. He's lucky to have you. Daniel. I lowered the letter slowly. Across the room, Lena stood frozen in the doorway. She had only heard the final sentence, but judging by the tears filling her eyes, she knew exactly whose handwriting rested in my hands. Lena didn't ask to read the letter. She stood in the doorway, her fingers gripping the frame so tightly her knuckles turned white. I won't ask what's inside. Her voice was barely audible. It's from Daniel. I folded the letter carefully. I know. She looked at the envelope as though it might burn her. Did he? She stopped. Did he blame me? The question lingered between us. I could have lied. It would have been easier. Kinder. Instead, I handed her the letter. You should decide for yourself. She stared at it without moving. I don't deserve to. Maybe not. The honesty made her flinch. But it's still addressed to the story you lived. Slowly, she accepted it. She sat at the dining table. The same table where we had celebrated birthdays. Helped Ethan build school projects. Shared silent dinners. Now it witnessed something entirely different. As she read, the room remained perfectly still. The only sound came from paper trembling in her hands. Halfway through, she covered her mouth. Near the end, tears blurred the ink. When she finished, she didn't cry loudly. She simply lowered her forehead onto the table. I thought. Her voice broke. I thought if I kept helping him. She struggled to breathe. Then one day I'd stop feeling guilty. I remained silent. But I only created new guilt. She laughed weakly through tears. And this one belongs to Ethan. No one answered. Because there was nothing left to argue. Only truth. The following week, Daniel's attorney contacted me again. There is another matter. What is it? Mr. Harper requested one final public meeting regarding the Harper Foundation. I wasn't aware there was a foundation. It was established 6 months ago. For what purpose? She smiled faintly. Single-parent education grants. I blinked. Excuse me. He never announced it publicly. Why? He believed charity should help people, not reputations. I looked out my office window. Cars moved below. Life continued. He also left instructions regarding the first annual ceremony. What instructions? He requested that you present the opening speech. I almost refused. Then I remembered the letter. I'll attend. The auditorium was filled with students, teachers, journalists, and families who had benefited from the foundation. Large photographs of Daniel lined the stage. Not as a businessman, but laughing with children, visiting schools, reading books in libraries. A side of him very few people had ever seen. The host adjusted the microphone. Before today's scholarships are awarded, we'd like to invite Mr. Lucas Carter to speak. The applause was polite. I stepped onto the stage. The spotlight felt warmer than expected. For several seconds, I simply looked at the audience. Then I spoke. I spent years believing this event would never exist. The room grew quiet. I knew Daniel Harper as someone's first love. A few reporters immediately looked up. I later knew him as a businessman. I paused. And finally, I smiled sadly. As a man who learned how to let go. No dramatic music. No rehearsed emotion. Just honesty. Most people think redemption comes from grand gestures. I shook my head. It doesn't. It begins the moment someone accepts responsibility without asking for applause. The audience remained completely silent. I hope everyone receiving today's scholarships remembers one thing. Your past explains you. It must never imprison you. When I stepped away from the podium, the applause felt different. Not louder, warmer. Daniel's portrait stood behind me. For the first time, it no longer felt like the shadow hanging over my marriage. It felt like the memory of a flawed man who had finally found peace. 3 months passed. Summer returned. The apartment no longer felt heavy. Not because everything had healed, because we had stopped pretending healing was complete. Lena began attending counseling. She suggested couples therapy. I agreed. Not because I believed it would save our marriage. Because Ethan deserved parents who could speak without hidden resentment. Session after session, uncomfortable truths surfaced. You confuse guilt with love. The counselor's words lingered in the room. Lena nodded quietly. I know. You also confuse forgiveness with returning things to how they were. She lowered her head. I know. The counselor turned toward me. And you? I answered after a long silence. I confuse protecting others with carrying everything alone. The counselor smiled gently. Now we're finally talking. Weeks later, an investigative business magazine released a lengthy report. Its headline spread across every financial news outlet. The collapse of Eastern Ventures. Inside the fraud that destroyed hundreds of families. I recognized the company immediately. It had been Daniel's largest competitor. The same executives who had mocked him during his bankruptcy. The report uncovered years of forged contracts, bribery, and investment fraud. Dozens of executives were arrested. Assets frozen. Luxury homes seized. Reporters camped outside courthouse entrances. The scandal dominated every news broadcast. One evening, Ethan looked up from his homework. Daddy, why are those people crying on TV? I muted the television. They made choices. Bad ones. Yes. And now, they're living with the consequences. He considered that carefully. So nobody punished them? I smiled. Sometimes life does that by itself. He nodded as though storing the lesson somewhere deep inside. Lena quietly watched our conversation from the kitchen. Later that night, she found me watering the balcony plants. You always believed that. What? That people eventually meet the consequences of their choices. I did. She looked toward the stars. I used to think consequences meant revenge. And now? She smiled faintly. I think consequences are simply the bill that arrives after every decision. I looked at her. She looked older. Not physically. Emotionally. There was humility where certainty once lived. She reached into her pocket and handed me a small key. Our old storage unit. I frowned. What's inside? Everything from before we married. Photos. Letters. Gifts. She took a slow breath. I don't want to carry ghosts anymore. I accepted the key. What do you want me to do with it? She answered without hesitation. Whatever helps you finally move forward. For the first time in years, the choice truly belonged to me. The storage unit smelled of dust, cardboard, and forgotten years. The fluorescent light above flickered once before settling into a steady hum. I unlocked the metal door with the small brass key Lena had given me. It rolled upward with a tired groan. Inside were 6 neatly labeled boxes. No clutter, no chaos, just memories packed with careful hands. I stood there for a long moment before opening the first box. Photo albums, university notebooks, movie tickets, birthday cards, a faded scarf. Nothing dramatic, nothing scandalous. Just the ordinary fragments of 2 young people who had once believed life would always move in a straight line. I sat on the concrete floor and slowly turned each page. There were photographs of Lena smiling beneath cherry blossoms, Daniel standing beside her during a campus festival, groups of classmates laughing at late-night barbecue dinners. I expected jealousy. Instead, I felt strangely calm. This wasn't the woman I'd married. It was simply the young woman she used to be. People deserved a past. What hurt wasn't that she had loved someone before me. It was that she had allowed yesterday to interfere with today. By the time I reached the last box, the afternoon sun had begun slipping through the narrow window near the ceiling. Inside rested one final envelope. It was addressed in Lena's handwriting. If Lucas ever chooses to open this. I frowned. The envelope had never been sealed. Carefully, I unfolded the letter. Lucas, if you're reading this, then you've already reached the storage room. I don't know whether we'll still be married. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. But there are things I should have said years ago. When Daniel returned, I believed I was helping someone who had once mattered to me. I kept telling myself it wasn't love. Maybe it wasn't. But I finally understand that loyalty can become just as dangerous when it's directed toward the wrong place. Every hour I gave away belonged to you and Ethan. I cannot return those hours. I cannot ask you to forget them. If one day you decide that your life is happier without me, please don't stay because of guilt. Don't become the person I became. Live honestly. Love honestly. Raise Ethan honestly. That's the husband and father I always admired, even when I failed to deserve him. Lena. I folded the letter carefully. There were no tears, only acceptance. For the first time, I believed every word she'd written. Not because she wanted forgiveness, because she'd finally stopped asking for it. When I returned home that evening, Ethan was building a cardboard castle in the living room. Daddy, he waved excitedly. I'm making a fortress. It looks impressive. It needs a bridge. I think I can help. For nearly an hour, we built tiny towers using cereal boxes and colored tape. Lena watched from the kitchen, not interrupting, just smiling quietly. When Ethan finally ran off to wash his hands before dinner, she walked over. You went. I did. What did you decide? I looked at her. I threw everything away. She closed her eyes. Thank you. I kept one thing. Her expression tightened. What? I handed her the letter she'd written. You should have this. She stared at it for several seconds. I don't deserve to. Maybe not. She smiled through tears. You still answer like that. Because it's true. Instead of arguing, she simply nodded. Years ago, she would have defended herself. Now, she accepted difficult truths without demanding comfort. That, more than anything else, told me she'd changed. Summer vacation arrived. Ethan begged us to take him camping. I want to sleep in a tent. There'll be bugs, Lena warned. I'll be brave. There'll be no video games. I'll survive. There might not be ice cream. He gasped dramatically. That's too dangerous. I laughed. So we're going? He grinned so widely that the answer had already been decided. The campsite overlooked a quiet lake surrounded by pine trees. Morning mist floated above the water. Birdsong replaced traffic. For the first time in years, my phone remained switched off for an entire weekend. Ethan spent hours trying to catch fish. He caught exactly one old boot. It's a lake monster shoe. He proudly declared it his greatest discovery. Even Lena laughed until tears formed in her eyes. That evening we sat around a small campfire. Orange flames danced beneath a sky crowded with stars. Ethan rested against my shoulder, already half asleep. Daddy, when I grow up. Yes. I want a family like ours. The words struck both of us. He continued sleepily. Because even when Mommy made mistakes. He yawned. You stayed. Lena quietly covered her face. After Ethan fell asleep inside the tent, neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she broke the silence. I don't deserve that child's faith. No parent does. She looked confused. What do you mean? We earn it every day. She stared into the fire. I spent years thinking love was a feeling. And now, I think it's the choices we repeat. I nodded. That's closer. She smiled sadly. You still won't tell me whether we'll make it. No. Why? Because I don't know. The honesty hurt. But it also freed us. No false promises. No dramatic declarations. Just two imperfect adults standing before the future without pretending certainty existed. Months later, Ethan's primary school held an awards ceremony. He won the school's kindness award. Not for grades. Not for sports. For helping another student who had recently lost his father. When his teacher called him onto the stage, he looked terrified. Then he spotted us. Me, Lena, standing together in the audience. He smiled. His fear disappeared instantly. After the ceremony, the principal approached us. You've raised an extraordinary young man. I looked at Ethan running across the playground. No. I smiled. He taught us how to become better parents. The principal laughed softly. I hope you know how rare that is. As we walked home, Ethan proudly carried his small trophy between us. One hand held mine. The other held Lena's. He swung our arms happily. For him, the future still felt simple. And perhaps, that innocence was exactly what deserved protecting. Autumn arrived quietly. The maple tree outside our apartment had turned a deep shade of red, and every morning Ethan insisted on stepping through piles of fallen leaves before getting into the car. They crunch better this way. Lena laughed. You say that every year. And it's still true. I watched them from the driver's seat. There was no heaviness anymore. Not because the past had disappeared, because it no longer controlled every conversation. A week later, I received an invitation from Ethan's school. Career Inspiration Day. Parents were invited to speak about life rather than work. The principal smiled apologetically. Children remember stories more than job titles. I agreed. The school auditorium buzzed with excited voices. Doctors, teachers, firefighters, engineers. Parents lined up to speak. When my turn came, I walked onto the stage carrying nothing. No notes, no slides, only the truth. I own a company. A few children nodded politely. But that's not the most important thing about me. I smiled toward Ethan. The most important job I've ever had is being someone's father. The children listened surprisingly carefully. When I was younger, I believed strength meant winning arguments. I paused. I was wrong. A little girl in the front row raised her hand. What is strength then? I answered without thinking. Choosing who you become after someone disappoints you. The room became very quiet. Another child asked, "Did someone disappoint you?" I smiled gently. Yes. Did you hate them? No. Why not? Because hatred would have asked my son to carry a burden that belonged to adults. The principal slowly lowered her head. Several parents wiped their eyes. When I finished, Ethan sprinted across the stage before anyone could stop him. He hugged me tightly. My dad's the best. Children applauded. Teachers laughed. I held him close. I've had the best teacher. He frowned. Who? You. That evening, Lena stood beside me on the apartment balcony. The principal called. Oh. She asked if you'd speak again next year. I smiled. I'll think about it. She nodded. After a long silence, she spoke again. I've signed the transfer papers. What papers? The apartment. I looked at her. I've transferred half of everything into Ethan's education trust. You didn't need to. I know. She smiled softly. But I wanted to. I recognized the difference immediately. Years ago, she would have hoped such a gesture might earn forgiveness. Now, she simply believed it was the right thing to do, without expecting anything in return. Winter came earlier than expected. Snow dusted the city overnight. One afternoon, while leaving the office, I noticed someone waiting outside. Olivia Chun, Daniel's former attorney. She smiled politely. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. She handed me a thin folder. The Harper Foundation has completed its first year. I accepted it. The scholarships helped 112 students. She looked genuinely proud. He would have liked that. She nodded. He also left one final instruction. I blinked. There's more. She laughed quietly. Only one sentence. She opened the folder. He wrote. She glanced at the page before reading aloud. If Lucas ever asks whether I regretted losing my first love. She smiled. Tell him I eventually realized my greatest blessing was that she found someone capable of loving her better than I ever could. The cold wind carried the words away. I closed my eyes. Thank you. Olivia bowed slightly before walking toward the snowy street. I stood there alone. Not grieving. Not celebrating. Simply saying goodbye. For the last time. Spring returned exactly 5 years after the night Daniel had walked into our anniversary dinner. 5 years. The same number promised by the title of our story. The city park overflowed with families enjoying the warm afternoon. Cherry blossoms drifted gently across the lake. Ethan raced ahead with a soccer ball under one arm. I'm going to score 10 goals. You said that yesterday. I'll score 11 today. Lena laughed. Ambitious. He ran toward his friends, leaving us alone beneath a blooming tree. Neither of us spoke immediately. We watched our son instead. Healthy, happy, confident. Everything I'd once feared losing. Lena finally broke the silence. 5 years ago, I looked at her. I never imagined we'd be here. No. I thought if I just worked harder. She shook her head. Everything would go back to normal. It never does. I know. She smiled with quiet acceptance. I don't want the old normal anymore. I waited. I want the honest one. The breeze carried pink petals between us. I can't ask you to erase what happened. No. I can't ask you to love me the way you once did. No. I can't even ask whether you've completely forgiven me. She looked down. So I'll only ask one thing. I stayed silent. When Ethan remembers his childhood. Her voice trembled. Please let him remember 2 parents who never stopped trying to become better. I looked toward the soccer field. Ethan had just fallen. He dusted himself off without crying. Then he laughed and kept running. Children heal quickly. Adults take longer. Sometimes a lifetime. I can promise you that. She closed her eyes in relief. Thank you. We stood together without touching. There was no dramatic embrace, no grand confession, no fairy tale ending. Only something quieter, something stronger. Respect, trust, slowly rebuilding. Hope, no longer based on wishes but on daily choices. Ethan suddenly sprinted toward us, grinning from ear to ear. Dad, he threw his arms around my waist. Mom, he hugged her next. I scored 12. I thought you said 11. I changed my mind. We laughed together. Real laughter, not borrowed from happier days. Created in that moment. As the sun began to set, Ethan slipped one hand into mine and the other into Lena's. The three of us walked toward home. Behind us, the wind scattered cherry blossoms across the path, covering footprints that no longer needed to be followed. Some loves begin with passion, some end with regret, but the strongest are rebuilt through responsibility, honesty, and the courage to face every consequence without looking away. And as I looked at the little boy walking confidently between us, I finally understood something that had taken years to learn. The greatest revenge was never making someone suffer.